Hello, hello, assembled group. This would be Marla with Comtech. I welcome you all to CBR Phase 2. We're just waiting for a few more people who have signed up to join us, so if everybody could please just stand by. I'm just going to mute out and give people another 2-3 minutes to log in before I begin, if that's all right. One moment. Okay, I think we might be one shy of who we were all expecting, but I'm going to go ahead and start. This is, of course, being recorded and will be viewable. We'll be sending out a link for YouTube. I think it's going to be on. So again, welcome everybody who's come to join us. This has got to do with the CRA regulation changes that came into force in effect on September the 15th. And before I go into all of those, I have one announcement that I almost wish I had audio so I could hear the cheers from the gallery, is the 7-year report is soon to be available in a sequelized version so that anybody who's on 12.2 and higher will have a report that will run within minutes as opposed to hours. So please watch your email blast for that, because we'll be making it available on the Member Center as soon as we've got all the testing done with it. But it's going to be really, really fast, and it'll completely optimize that process of your regular weekly or monthly credit reporting. All right, so on with the show. The first thing I wanted to do was cover the regulation changes themselves. And what I can tell you is there are no assumptions or interpretations being made. I personally got in touch with all 3 credit bureaus to verify our understanding of what these regulation changes are, so that there would be absolute certainty that we programmed in a way that would make everything in accordance with what the expectations are. So first of all, the one thing to be aware of is that all these changes that are coming into effect right now are only applicable to accounts that will be hitting the Bureau that have a date of debt greater than September the 15th of 2017. Anything where your date of debt, whether it be your delinquency date or your charge date, or some of you may refer to it as a date of service, that is prior to that, the new regulations are not applicable. It's not retroactive. It's a go-forward change in process. So everything that our software is going to do with respect to these changes is going to be looking at that date. So having said that, here are the changes as they've come in. They have laid down that for medical debt, that they don't want to see them reported unless it is 180 days minimum from the date of debt. Where a debt is being paid in full or in part by insurance, they want the all debt furnishers to be removing with a full delete those accounts, and all responsible parties, whether it's a primary debtor or a cosigner proper, must have at least one or the other. Both is preferable, obviously, but they must have one or the other of a date of birth or social security number. They will no longer accept accounts that have neither. So, one more category, authorized users. If there's anyone out there who's doing like Amex type credit card debt, if there's authorized users, the minimum requirements of one or the other of a DOB and SSN are also applicable if you're reporting with that particular designation. All right, so what we've done in the software is we have opened up a lot of different fields so that you have better control of what you're doing with the accounts. You have the ability, let me just go into our credit bureau settings.
Screen sharing fell off.
Screen sharing fell off? Screen sharing. Okay.
It's on now. It's on now.
All right, because it, I apologize. I just got a flag from internal here that the screen wasn't showing. Is it showing now, I guess? Yes. Thank you. Thank you very kindly. All right. Moving along. So sorry. Greenhorn on the webinar here. I do apologize for that. All right. So here we are in our familiar credit bureau setups. You have all been utilizing this delay report button and are familiar with setting up a global number of days. So some of you may be using 30, some of you may be using 45, some of you may be using 60. Whatever the case may be, this would be referred to as the global setting. We've now placed an override so that you can have a setting that is for your majority of accounts, but then for specific clients that it checks there as well, and it does an override and uses different parameters for that purpose. So let's just say, I'm going to keep it simple. I'm just going to put 30 there. There's one more feature I want to come back to here, but I don't want to just disrupt the flow where we're at. And I'm going to go and grab a client, any client, and go into the advanced. So you'll notice the credit bureau switches used to be over here on the extreme left, and because there's more fields that have been added to it, we've pulled them out and we've brought them over here just above the OK button. So right here where it says credit bureau reporting, of course these are the familiar switches that you've always been checking previously. Now, if this was a medical client and you wanted to go 180 days from the delinquency date, you would check that radio box. Or if your site uses the charged as your date of debt, you would use this one. You also have the option of using from today, which is also what the default is. What is very important to keep in mind is that once you make a selection to do one of these, that the date, of course, must be filled. Because if you're preparing your accounts for credit bureau and the date that it's supposed to be counting from is blank, then the only thing that it can do is take this 180 and count from today, because it doesn't have any basis to do otherwise. And to clarify further, this has no bearing on what is actually going out to the credit bureau. The Metro 2 layout is carved in stone. It is what it is. If you've got both dates populated, both dates will still go to the bureau as normal, as usual. But what these radio buttons are doing is they are providing a different way of doing the prepare accounts for credit bureau. So if you have checked one of these boxes and input an amount of days, it will count from whatever the date is in the field that it's pointed at and use that as the date due on the Metro contact. All right? So, popping back to the credit bureau reporting, I wanted to draw attention to another field that overwrote something. If you've got a minimum threshold that you do not wish to report to the bureau, for example, $25 and less, or $10 and less, or $100 and less, this is also a new button or a new switch where you can input the amount, your minimum balance that you want to show to the bureau. And when you are, again, preparing accounts for credit bureau, if there's anything less than that amount, it will be ignored by the prepare process if those accounts are in the tag list that you're subjecting the batch to. So that's a great feature, and I'm hoping there are some yays in the crowd. I see I have a question here. Those switches. Do these switches automatically turn on? Well, what they do is when you do the batch process, okay, the question for the room is, do those switches automatically turn on credit reporting at the debtor? And the answer is yes, but you're still doing your normal process of preparing accounts for credit bureau. So if I were to go into a client that I've gotten ready for this purpose and go get some debtors, and I want to go with this one and this one, this one, and this one. all debtors, and view tags. So on any normal day, this is what you would have when you've gotten your new business together at the end of the day and you're going to do your normal batch processing. Now what I've done is I've also customized my list view here, so you can see I've got listed dates, you can see I've got delinquency dates and charge dates. The client in question that I'm looking at here is client number 98, who is set for delinquency 180 days. So what we're going to do is we're going to do our normal new business batch processing for prepare accounts for credit bureau. And you'll notice that in two cases, or in one case, I've got the delinquency date greater than September the 15th. And then I've got other cases where it's less than. And in this case, I've left it blank. So this is by design. So into our normal course, prepare accounts for credit bureau. And this is a familiar screen. And we're going to go ahead. And this is retroactive. I just want to point out one more little thing that maybe some people aren't aware of. Even if you're saying yes to report cosigners, you do need to have your default settings set properly at your credit bureau preference level, because that's where it's ultimately going to check. All right. So I want to send these accounts seriously past due and assign to collections. I'm saying yes to cosigners, but again, it's going to accept this as being a true yes because my defaults are set appropriately. Giving everyone a moment to read the screen because they've changed just a little bit. Now, it's not going to take a little while. We've been doing a lot of optimizing, especially on anyone who's on CB 12.2 and higher. Okay, so we're in. And I'm not going to clear my tags. So if we go take a look at this guy, CBR tab is lit. The Metro is there. It's dated for March, which I would have expected based on this date here. Next one. This one started counting from June, and it's dated in December as would be expected. Same thing. This one's now in January with the Metro. It's counting from July. Now this one is dated October, 1 month from today, because there was nothing here. So please be aware of that. If you are reviewing your tags, sort of spot checking when you're first trying out the new, the new version, please be aware that if you see that result and it's not an intermittent problem or error, it doesn't have anything to count from. So it's entirely possible if you do manual data entry that somebody may have inadvertently put it in the wrong field and it just needs to be put in there, and this can be updated manually on the few that may happen on. But if you're if the information's coming in from your clients, they do, of course, need to give you a date of debt, and you need to have it in the correct place. And that's everything that has changed. The other thing to be aware of is where this is an older date. If we had one here, for example, that was set up for January of 2017, well, 180 days would already be expired, and it would theoretically put the account up as being eligible to be reported today. And we wanted to ensure that nobody had any issues with validation periods, so there is a fail-safe in there that where you've got a client override in play, that it will take whichever is greater, either with the client override plus the charge or the delinquency date, or today plus whatever your global setting is. So in this case, because we had a global setting of 30 days, it took that instead because it had nowhere else to go. And in this case, it would have done the same thing if any of these dates were from another year, like a past year, or more than 180 days behind today. I'm just reading some questions that have popped up on my board here. All right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a pause on the questions just for the moment. And come back to where we were. So is there any confusion as to what I meant by where it's going to default, if there's nothing else to go by, that it's going to default to the global setting, because that's the way it's going to operate. All right, I didn't see anything pop up. That's great. All right. And since that's pretty much, I think I've covered everything in terms of the way the actual software needs to operate. Oh, I wanted to show you guys a few other things. The new fields are available from everybody. I hope everybody knows this. There's a function that's right here in your print where you can output the printable field codes for, collect printable field codes as well as the SQL codes just by clicking at any given time, and you can get them whenever you want them on demand. The new field names are right here, and they are the from charged, from delinquency, and from today. The radio buttons are in SQL a bit switch. So what we're going to do, if someone has like a lot of clients and there's going to be some significantly sized tag lists where you want to change things from one direction, whether you want to go charge a delinquent in the number of days, support's going to be making available sort of a generic report that you can modify internally for your own individual usage that will allow you to run against the tag list and automatically turn on switches and fill the delay days fields for large volumes of accounts at a time, instead of everybody having to think they have to sit there and do these on a manual one-by-one basis. The other thing that we're going to do is we're going to also make another utility report for the insurance. There isn't any way to launch an automatic delete in response to posting a payment that has in CollectLand a description of being an insurance payment. But what we are going to do, and this will also be made available on the Member Center and everybody will get a message blast when it's available, is we're going to create a report that will ask you for a posted date range, and on the inside of it will allow you to tailor it to your own specific transaction codes, because everybody's got their own customized usage of code numbers, and it will output a tag list of anything that had any of those target types of transaction, whether it's a insurance payment in or an insurance payment out. And then with a tag list, you would be able to launch a mass delete on the entire tag list. So that will, especially for volume agencies, prevent the need of having to click into the CBR tab on a per file basis and select the delete account from bureau option that would be in the status code setting. And the other thing I wanted to mention was we've also done some considerable changes for the better in the CBR log that outputs at the end of when you run your file. And it now has a much more streamlined appearance and output. You're not going to get those thousands and thousands and thousands of lines where it tells you it doesn't have a charge date, but oh wait, at the bottom we use the delinquency date instead. All of that's been filtered out. It will tell you if a consumer has been rejected for not having the minimum standard of either a date of birth or social. If you have a scenario where the primary debtor has one or the other and it's fine and it's eligible for reporting, but the co-signer is missing information, it will allow the primary debtor to go, but it will withhold the co-signer. So on this one, when I staged a test, I purposely left off date of birth and social on the co-signer, and I only put a social on the primary debtor. Now, anything that tells you there's a warning, it still went. It didn't get rejected. It's just letting you know that there's no date of birth or social, depending on what the case may be, on that particular account, but it still did go. In the case of invalid, it didn't go at all. So the log is extremely helpful now, and I would strongly recommend that anyone who's kind of gotten used to not paying too close attention to it just by the sheer volume of information that was in there that was not necessary, please give it a look after you've patched up and done your first reporting, because you're going to find that now it is informative. It is only giving you information that you need to know about. All right. And having covered those two bits, I'm taking a look at the questions on the side here. So I have one question: can we filter out the warnings? And no, those are static. We don't have, like, they're not user selectable, but we can put that on the list. Hang on a second. Well, one idea, and Karim is here with me in product management. One suggestion for sorting out and filtering out the warnings would be to take that log, put it in Excel, and then you would be able to filter out the warnings that way if you just wanted to delete them and get them out of the way. Why would it default there instead of the client? All right, the next question I have here is, why would it default to the global setting instead of the client. And that's because at that stage, when there's no information, it can't make a decision. So it has to default somewhere, and that was the decision that was made. All right. So the question, just to clarify, like they were looking at saying, well, why, if the client's 180 and the global is 30, why not take it to 180?
Yeah.
Well, the answer to that would be because it would be 180 from when? Because like when it's looking from the client, it's trying to look at specifically a date that's not present. So, I mean, if you had selected today as your radio button there, it would have something to count from. But you haven't. You've selected one of the other choices. All right. So let me just, I'm just going through the questions, and there's quite a lot of them. How do we mark files for client details only? All right, the writer of the question for how do we mark files for client details only, could you please elaborate a little bit? And I'm going to move on to another one. I'll come back to this one. Law currently reports warnings for missing DOBs and old accounts where the DOB requirement went into effect as of 9/15. The report would be more helpful if it only reported warnings on accounts submitted after 9/15. The point of giving you the information was so that you're aware of the quality of your data going in. So if you can see that a client is perhaps not giving you sufficient information and you're constantly seeing those accounts coming up, that you would be in a position to perhaps get in touch with your client and advise them that, you know, you're more than happy to do the reporting, but these are the challenges that you're facing, and if they could please do something about the quality of the data that they're sending you. Okay. So the question that I asked for more detail, I've now got it, but I'm going to say let's take that one offline, and I'll look into that for you and see what the possible response would be. The example was the state of Massachusetts, Mass, does not allow collection agency reporting. We can only report client detail. Client detail would be the K1 segment, and the one thing we can't do is suppress the rest of the record. So let me talk to that individual separately and offline. Is there a way to distinguish CBR only non-paying debtors at 30 days and not every debtor? Well, what I would recommend, okay, so the question is there a way to distinguish and report to CBR only non-paying debtors at 30 days and not every debtor? My recommendation at that point might be to not use a delay days so much as to perhaps gather accounts by listed date range and have us create a custom report for you that would do that filter so that you would only end up with a tag list that is in the range of interest that has not received a payment, and then use that as your source to go ahead and batch them up and send them out. Because once they have been prepared and they're sitting there with a Metro contact that has a valid due date on it, pulling it back and deleting it is not going to be something that I can foresee the software having an automation to do. Okay. Want to confirm that any medical account that has a data service prior to, yes. Okay, so this one is, want to confirm that any medical account that has a data service prior to September the 15th is okay to report in 30 days. I would say yes, because, and I asked this question multiple times to each bureau to make absolutely certain there was no misunderstanding in the import of the nuances of what I was exactly asking. And in every case, they were solid and responded the same way, and that is the new changes are only applicable to those which have a date of debt that is greater than, so not equal to, but greater than. So let's, for all intents and purposes, say September the 16th and forward of 2017. Anything before that, nothing has changed. All of your shelf business that you've been currently reporting, nothing has changed. They'll continue to go as normal. The client screen was selected, ignore that. There. Okay, I'm getting, there's sort of, I think there's a trend here where the group is wanting to lean towards, if the client has got this scenario where this is the number of days and this is the date that it's looking at, and if this date is blank, go 180 days from today instead of the global setting. What I'll do to stem the tide there is I'm going to take that one under advisement, and I will get with product management and we'll discuss. For the moment, the way it's working is, in the event that we don't have a date to count from, it reverts to the global settings. So accept, please, that for the time being, that is the way it works. But we're going to discuss internally, and if it seems to be a better solution to go this way, then that could potentially come out in a future release. So definitely take that under consideration. All right, and I'm just looking, and I haven't seen any more new questions pop up. Has anybody else got any questions with respect to how this is going to operate? Has anybody, since we still got some time on the clock in terms of the time slot that was built for this, is there any existing credit bureau questions that anybody wants to table while we've got the time together to perhaps address? And I'm just pausing to see if anything pops up. And I'm not seeing anything, so I'm going to go with everybody must be good. So again, this video is going to be, oh wait, there's one. Okay. So the question is, in the actual CVR tab, why are we not to use the control manually? Well, the reason is, once you've checked that box, all of the collect automations, particularly as it pertains to reporting a full file, are foregone conclusions. It will not pay attention to that account because you've identified that you're going to look after it yourself and go in there and manually force a Metro contact. There's some parts of the system that are like legacy. There was a point many years ago where, you know, people were less comfortable with allowing automations to take care of things. So they wanted that little safety blanket of being able to say, okay, well, I did it with my own two little hands. I would say in this day and age, in the volumes that, you know, we're generally working with on the agency side, there's never any reason to need to use that checkbox. And the problem is, once you check it, there isn't any easy way to uncheck it. It isn't just as simple as unchecking it, because what it does behind the scenes is it locks that account down so that none of the automations to report full file will pay attention to it again. So even if you think it was taken off, it wouldn't have been. So that becomes a problem, because then, you know, it begins to look like Collect is ignoring an account, but the audit trail of it having been clicked at one point is not readily apparent any further. So that would be why we wouldn't want to be using that switch. Okay, we currently use the scheduler to batch our processing. With the changes, do I need to make any changes with our scheduler? No, you don't. If you're on the right version, it's just going to do what it's got to do. If you haven't set anything on your clients, it's going to operate as normal. There's one important detail. If you do not have an actual global setting, but you do have different clients that you want read for their different periods of delay, irrespective of which field it's going to delay from, this box here must be checked. So even if there's nothing here, it won't look at the client unless this box is checked in the global settings. So I can't emphasize that one enough. All right. Is there any difference between manually running the reporting to credit bureau versus running it to the scheduler? The answer to that would be, the only difference would be you don't get any of the pop-ups that require a response. It just would take the affirmative, like, yes, you're done, yes, you're finished, yes, you want to proceed. It would just do all of the steps for you to keep forging ahead. Okay, so could I walk through a summary of the steps for credit bureau reporting for those of us that are new to this? I'm going to say yes, but I'm going to leave that one to the very end, because there's going to be some folks that are very well versed in it and they may not want to hang out. So for the party that did ask that, or any others that are out there that would be interested, please hang on. I will get to that one at the very end. I have another site that is saying we have version 11.6.3.5.1. It's not required to upgrade to 12, but is there another build I need to update to? Yes. The answer to that question is you need to update to CV11 6.4.1. and it is on the Member Center, and it's the latest build that's out there right now. All right. Okay, then I have a question here. Should the inhibit phone numbers be checkmarked? That is entirely up to yourselves, but a lot of these are got, there's a number of switches in here that are meant for credit grantors. So if you're set up in your company details as being a credit grantor as opposed to a collection agency, then some of these are applicable, but not so much, because when a collection agency is reporting, it's not reporting a trade line like a credit grantor does. It's reporting to the public section of a consumer's credit report, identifying that there's an account in collection. So it doesn't get the same kind of output on their record that other trade lines do. So I would say in this particular instance, this one might even be specific to credit grantors. I just hit F1. This switch is on to prevent collecting sending phone numbers. The output will be zeros. The ensures the debtor privacy, unlisted phone numbers, the global settings. So it doesn't say that one is specific to credit grantors. However, if your site is dealing with a sensitive type of consumer and you do have unpublished numbers in your database, your clients may wish you to use that switch, but that's why they're user defined. You can leave it on or off. But these ones for certain are relative only if you are reporting as a credit grantor. All right. Okay, so I'm not seeing any more popping up, and I'm about to roll through a general overview of credit reporting. So anybody who has got complete control of their processes and doesn't wish to listen to this part, please feel free to abandon camp. All right, here's another question. How about the report all? This switch is part of the changes that came into force in effect last year. So when you report to the Bureau, now if you report to the Bureau multiple times a month, I believe you can get away with doing just your updates for a number, say 2-3 weeks, but once a month for certain, you have to report your full file. They are the credit. Well, I'm trying to find the most delicate way of putting this. Basically, the credit bureau is laying down the law and saying we're not going to sit here and try and figure out what agency has what accounts anymore. So if you haven't identified it as being with your agency, then it's not with your agency and they're going to drop it. So it's very important because, first of all, because they made it a regulation, and second of all, because you don't want them to start dropping your accounts because they haven't seen you report it. So full file is extremely important once per 30 days with absolute certainty if you want to ensure the integrity of your data that's being stored there. While I'm here, I don't want to stir up anything, but I also found out from one bureau in particular, it was TransUnion that identified this to me, that they do not pay any attention to the date of last payment. So with that whole 7-year report, where we've got it built in that it doesn't pay any attention to your money paying files, because from our side on the, the collection industry side, we know that if a debtor's acknowledged the debt, then that resets the clock on the age of the debt. The bureau that I had spoken to did not pay attention to that aspect. They're not looking at that at all. So as a group, as an industry group, perhaps that might start a conversation, because they may be dropping your accounts far sooner. So if you've got a large debt and the person is paying you out in small nominal amounts monthly, they shouldn't be able to get a mortgage or a car because the credit bureau threw your account out, but they still owe you $15,000. So just letting you know, something that I found out on the side there. But yeah, definitely report all was one of the regulations that came in 2016. And as well at that time, that if you have accounts that are aging out insofar as it's got nothing to do with the statute of limitations. That's one thing I also wanted to point out. The Credit Bureau's rule is more to do with age of account and the lifespan that they wanted to have at the Bureau, but still a paying account should be continued to be carried, one would think. So maybe something to look into. All right. So going from soup to nuts, if this was a normal process, every day you're going through your accounts and you're processing your batches for report accounts to Credit Bureau. So as I had the list here, I went into tools, batch processing. That's something that you do on a daily basis. When it's time to run the Credit Bureau, it's very important that in order of operations, the first thing you do before you get down to actually doing the Credit Bureau run is that you run that 7-year age out. What that 7-year report does for you is it goes through all of your accounts that are currently credit reporting. It looks for anything that is not had a delete as being the last Metro contact that was completed or standing on the account at present. It looks at the age of, when you get the report from the member center, it's hard-coded for the listed date, but if your agency uses always the delinquency date or always the charge date, it's a one-spot modification to customize it for your individual site. Pardon me, we use the listed date simply because we couldn't predict which of the two dates each site was going to want to select as their date of debt. And what that report does when it completes running is it produces a tag list of accounts that will allow you to go through and run a delete process. So let's just say for giggles, we had run that 7-year report and this is the tag list that I had ended up with. What I would be doing is I would be going into tools, batch processing, and I'm still going in to prepare accounts for Credit Bureau, but this time I'm not going to be preparing them because I'm doing an update or because they're new. I'm preparing them, as they say in this sentence right here, because I want to send them as delete from Bureau. So it is possible to do batch deletes as well. So it knows I have a tag list because that's what the 7-year report gave me. And what I would do at this stage is normally you just go ahead and click next. But when you're doing a delete, you go right here to delete account from credit bureau. And then when you click next, and if you have been reporting co-signers in the past, you want to make sure that you delete them as well. Those of you who know how to read the Metro layouts know that the code for delete account is DA, and it's usually very visible in the first third of the debtor's line. When you delete a cosigner, it's got the letter Z at the very last position of the J2 segment. And then we would say OK. So now I've got my deletes done. And I'm not going to clear the tags just so I can show for anyone who's not seen one of these before. That one, well, I may not get very far here because we hadn't actually deleted any. Or do I have one here? Nope. No. Because I hadn't actually reported any of these yet, they're not going to show the delete. What would happen is if I'm going to try to fake my way through this. Don't ever do this. It's a bad thing. There we go. Now, because I did this consecutively one by one, this is the one that should be on top. And you can see the DA is right there, ASDA. So AS93 is accounts in seriously past due and in collections. And this one is delete account from credit bureau. So once you've got your deletes processed, then it is simply a question of running your credit bureau. And however many of the bureaus you report to, you always want to mark your contacts as done. There's nothing over here, the sync to new bureau, this done date, this completed only. Ignore all of that. And then simply go to next. And here it is doing a pre-process to see what you got out there. And see it's saying then preliminary examination, I have 9. Did I still wish to proceed? Yes, I do. Probably very few of you are going to be in this particular boat where you're under 500. But if you do have one of those, just tell it to go ahead and proceed and do all. And here we are. I've got my 3 outputs. And it's telling me that it's done. It's telling me where all of the reports are, the exact path. It's also telling you where the log is. It's confirming the amount of accounts that it included in the report, and it's also how many that it rejected. So if we were to go to the log right now, we would see the one account that I had staged that had no date of birth and no social on that one cosigner, because that's what I know is already in there. Now down here where it's saying correct all errors before sending, that is an internal per site basis decision. I personally wouldn't hold back a file that has, 50,000 records or more in it for the sake of even 3,000 that have delinquency date issues or date of birth issues. It's not going to be possible to get the data in a lot of those cases, But again, we're trying to go for best practices here. If there's anything like a missing zip code or a badly configured address, there are other reasons why the credit bureau module will reject an account from going into the Metro record. We're giving you every possible avenue that we can to rerun and get your largest possible file out there. So that's what that's all about. I've got someone asking if we could do a demonstration of the 7-year report, and let me just see if I have a version of that. See missing, delinquency and a charge date. Plus this one we knew about down here. We've got a bad creditor classification code. Pardon me for one moment, you're going to get to see my very, very, very okay. So there's the CBR. There's everybody that's in it. There was no cosigners here. And then here's the K1 segment where your client information is. Now the 7-year report, if I have one, I was looking for it. Now, it's not likely to find anything on this database, but I'm game to go ahead and run it because it's been asked. So, you pick this report up from the Member Center. Just a case of selecting it from your print menu. So, print, reports, and letters. And you can start it from anywhere. And as you can see, it's already on mine, it's already done, but it didn't find any because if you're looking at my status bar down here at the bottom, the T and the S, it doesn't find anything that was tagged. What this report does is it tags a list. It doesn't ask you any questions. It's from the point that you launch it, it goes sniffing through your entire database looking to see if there's any accounts that meet that criteria. If there was, you would be back on a debtor browse list, and you would definitely see that this letter T down here would be raised and would be yellow. And you would then go edit and then view tags. And then once you had your tag list, that's when you would go ahead and go tools, batch processing, and follow that delete process that I just demonstrated a few moments ago, where you modify the credit bureau status code to delete account from seriously past due and in collection. Now, when you are batching your accounts for credit reporting to begin with, if you have closed border states, for example, if you have clients that don't report, these are all accounts that you should filter out of your tag list before you go to the actual tools, batch processing, and prepare accounts for credit bureau. Because if you prepare them, then they're prepared. They've been initiated and turned on for credit reporting. So if you do, in fact, have accounts that you have a series of parameters where you don't want to turn them on, then you need to make sure that your tag list is filtered. Now, for very, very large sites, this can be done by, again, a special report that can be written in SQL for the CB12s. And what it will do is it will ask you for a new business listed date range, and it will go through and it will only tag the accounts that meet the parameters that you want to prepare for credit reporting. So your closed border states will be out. Your minimum balances are no longer a concern because we have a field for that right there in the credit bureau settings. So if you have a minimum threshold balance, you have a place to put it. And you may have certain, if you have accounts that come in with judgments or accounts that come in with any other special criteria that you want to use as an exclude, if you have enough criteria on which to exclude, it is absolutely worth having us prepare a report for you to do that tagging process instead of trying to do it yourselves manually, because it will be, it's not going to be time consuming so much as it will be finicky at the manual level, because you'll have to tag a big list and then go back into the edit search criteria and then use, you know, a bunch of excludes to keep paring it down, paring it down, paring it down. And we can definitely optimize that for you by creating a report that does all of those interim steps. Daily batch processing of accounts for CBR. Okay. How to get the CBR report. That's available on the Member Center. One party asked that. And how often do you run the age out report? That is something that you need to run, I would say, monthly. If you report to the Bureau weekly, for example, it would be, and you have a large database, it would be a little bit of overkill. I think if you run it once before your last big run, so you've got all your deletes, because every month things are aging out. So it's not the kind of thing that you run once and you never have to run again, because as time marches forward, you've got accounts that are aging in the back end, and they're going to reach that point where there's been nothing going on and the account has to come off the bureau. So once a month is the recommendation. It does not need to be run more often than that. And mention daily batch processing of accounts for CBR. And what I meant by daily batch processing of accounts for CBR is when you input in new business, I'm trying to sort of bridge the distance between large agency and small agency. If you're putting your accounts in manually and you're just clicking into the CBR tab and turning it on as you go, then you don't have to worry about the daily batch thing. But the sites that are putting in hundreds and thousands of accounts, and primarily by import, they need to use the mass batch processing methodology to get their accounts initialized, because it would be an absolute impossibility to go through all of those accounts manually. It would make no sense, and it would be completely inefficiency for time. So when I refer to doing it once per day, you know, truthfully, even if all you put in is 50 accounts that day, you can just batch them up. For example, if I were to go in here and say, okay, I put in a new business, so I want to know how many accounts that I put in from today to today. And I click search. There's my new business. So even if I input these 3 accounts manually, if I didn't go into the CBR tab with my own 2 little hands and turn that account on by myself, then I would be able to batch them up at the end of the day and turn them all on together as a group. That's what the batch processing does for you. It allows you to do one time that which you don't have to do on an incremental basis on a per account, like per debtor, per debtor, per debtor. It's a redundant number of keystrokes that can save you time. The age-out report excludes accounts over 7 years but are receiving payments. The age-out report, the way we wrote it, is it says if the account has already been deleted from the Bureau, don't pay attention to it. If the account is over 7 years old, start paying attention to it. But if there has also been a payment that is less than 7 years ago, let it ride. So in other words, don't include it for delete. We are filtering your money files and not submitting them for deletion. If the Bureau's turning around and deleting them on you anyway, that isn't anything that we have any control of. We did everything we could to protect your money files to stay on the Bureau. We understand the importance of that. All right, so I have one user who is asking if we have accounts within a client that we have not checked the CBR box yet, does it automatically report those? The answer to that question is no, it does not. The check boxes that are in the client just means the client allows it. If you don't, in fact, initialize the debtor to actually do it, then it isn't getting done. So it is possible within the same client to have some debtors that are reporting and some that are not. Okay. All right, I've got one user that is saying, please demonstrate using batch to initialize accounts. Okay. Let me clear these. Just freshen up my list a little bit. So, if this is my new business for the day, or even if it's just one import, everyone's got their own particular choices. The one thing that's nice about Collect is it never forces you to do anything to suit itself. You always have the individual ability to do what you need to do your own way. Kind of like some of those restaurants that allow to have it your way. Go ahead and batch processing, prepare accounts for CBR. You're starting to see how very, very repetitive this is. It's always the same thing. It never gets more difficult than this. It's so easy. Now, when you're in here, you want to make sure that it says seriously past due and or assigned to collections. This is what would initialize brand new accounts for the Bureau. And then go ahead, if your defaults are set up to report cosigners and you want to report cosigners, I do recommend being consistent with this. The idea of trying to remember if you did, if you didn't, that starts to become very, very difficult. And there isn't, aside from reading your own Metro files, you won't be able to figure it out just by looking at the debtor record. So if you're reporting, you're reporting. If you're not, then you're not. Please be consistent. And following the prompts, I'm done. And I always like to look at a couple just to make sure things came out the way I expected. So there's my Metro. And because I took my global date off, it picked today. And the AS-93 says it's going out as a seriously past due and in collections. And it's eligible to go today because the due date is today. However, until such time as you actually go ahead and run the process, so there are the two phases. Phase one is taking your new accounts and initializing them. And then phase two is preparing the output to send to the Bureau. And if you've never seen an actual, this is what it looks like. So it's going to have all your company information. It's also going to have our name towards the end of the header record, and that's because it's required in the Metro 2 layout that if you're using a software provider, that their name has to be in there. And when you start reading the line, this is either going to be your file number or your client account number, depending on which way you report. Your status is over here. You see the 93s and the DA. Here's that one delete we threw in there. You come across, and this is the debtor, the J1 segment, and then all his information about the debt and everything, and the address is here. Or actually, I apologize. Yeah, that's the J1 segment because that's where it concludes. And here is the J2 segment. So this one has a cosigner. And it's still reporting because it's got a 2 down here. It would have the letter Z in this position right there if it was deleting a cosigner, which you can do. If you have a scenario where you must go and delete the cosigner because, let's say, they settled for half of the bill and you said you would release them, then the way you would do that, these things, this is the way it would normally look. The way you would go ahead and release this particular debtor, sorry, wrong spot, is delete borrower. So even though the main debtor continues to report, it is possible to delete the cosigner and only the cosigner. The other thing worth mentioning as well is when you are setting up a cosigner, if you want that cosigner to be reporting to the credit bureau, you need to come across to this association code, and you need to pick Associated Consumer, same address or different address. And you also need to identify that it's a joint contractual liability. There are a few other options in here, but truthfully, other than business commercial, I haven't met an agency yet that is so much using any of the others. Authorized user is a specific designation. This is a party that only owes, for example, on an Amex card, the primary owes everything, but the authorized user only would end up owing on what they charged on their individual number, and that would only be if the primary, for whatever reason, could not pay, like, for example, deceased or bankrupt. Same thing with a co-maker. A co-maker is only responsible if the primary cannot pay for reasons like bankruptcy or deceased. So generally speaking, joint contractual liability is what you're looking for, unless of course what you're defining in your cosigner is a corporate entity, ABC Company Inc. Bob's Garage is a trade name. So it's got to be a full corporate entity if you're going to name a business. Otherwise, the legally responsible party would still just be the individual if it was Bob's Garage. But your client would be better able to tell you whether or not it was a legal entity or whether or not it was a trade name. All right, checking my, please demonstrate the batch, okay. Is it possible to show a cosigner is disputing and not the main debtor? Well, that's a good question. So just I was reading it to myself there. The question is it possible to show that a cosigner is disputing and not the main debtor? And I'm just going through and I don't see that there is a designation for that. So, long story short, I would say ask your representative at the credit bureau what they want you to do if there is a dispute that's coming from the cosigner only. But there isn't, and again, our settings here are as per the original credit bureau Metro 2. So if there was a designation that could be set up for that, we'd have it because we have them all. All right, so we're a little bit over time right now. Is anybody else got any business or are we all good? All right. So I'm seeing some people dropping off. I'm seeing some questioners that are saying thank you. You're very welcome. And of course, you've got support if you need to contact us for any training or any other questions that you may have. And of course, this meeting is going to continue to be available, and you'll get links to where you can view it. So I want to thank everyone for taking time out of their busy day to join me, and happy CBRing. If there's anything else, please let us know. All right, with that, I'm going to end the meeting. Thank you.
That's it.